I don't know about you, but I really have a hard time letting go of scraps, especially little fabric scraps. They're so fun and beautiful, and I really like to craft with them. So today I'm going to be sharing some fun ideas on how to use up some of those scraps. Let's get started. These are some larger scrap pieces that are in some pretty shades of pink. I cut them down into some smaller squares as I didn't need the full sizes. I'll save that for another craft. This piece right here is a piece of old clothing of mine and I love the pattern, so I kept that fabric. I'm using this bowl from my cupboard as I wanted the circle that I'm going to be drawing out to be about 6 inches in size. So I'm just using a gel pen with a nice pointy nib, and I'm just going to trace around the bowl. Now you could use a die cut if you have one. I didn't have one big enough, so I just did it this way and it works just fine. I'm taking my scissors now and I'm going to cut the circle out. So just a little tip here, if you get ink on your bowl like I did or whatever container you're using, just use a baby wipe and that will wipe off the ink really well as if you get any of that ink on your hands. This works really great. Of course, you could use soap and water as well. Okay, so for the circles, I am going to be folding them in half, and then I'm going to take my fabric scissors, going to put the scissor blade into that fold line. I'm kind of pressing up a bit just to make it so it's a bit tight, and I'm going to cut along that fold line to create 2 half circles. Now for the little scrap that was a piece of clothing, there is a seam there. So I'm just cutting as close as I can to the seam just to remove that, as that's going to end up affecting the next step, and I want to remove that seam. Next, you're going to need some thread. Now I have this thread, it's doubled up and then knotted on the one end. I'm using a pretty pink that goes with all our fabrics, or all the fabrics I've chosen. You're going to want to fold your half circle into a quarter like you see me doing here, and I folded the 2 wrong sides together. I'm going to now be stitching a running stitch along that edge. Sorry, it's out of focus here. I thought I was in focus. That kind of frustrates me, but I do apologize. But just a basic running stitch along that edge. And then I'm just going to pull that thread just to help pull that through. And then I'm going to continue to finish until I get to the top. And then I'm going to knot the top off. And then you can go ahead and flip it out, and you're going to come up with a bit of a cone shape. Here I'm flipping it around. Now you are going to want to stitch a running stitch, that's just your basic stitch, along the top edge of the cone. And again, you're going to want to pull that thread through. Once you get to the end, you're going to pull that thread, kind of moving your little folded bits of fabric along your thread, and you're going to be creating a bit of a pocket. You can see that there. And now I'm taking some fiber fill and I'm going to add that fill into the little pocket. You just want to make sure you don't overfill it, just enough so then you can tighten it up in the end. Once you have your thread pulled tight, now you can go ahead and stitch that opening closed. This is just going to help to hold it together a bit better. And then I'm going to tie it off with a knot. I really noticed that strawberries are trending big time right now. And since it is strawberry season, I thought, well, let's try out this fun little fabric strawberry craft that I saw, and it is the perfect way to use up some pretty scraps. So I have this cute little strawberry shape. I'm going to be using some scraps of felt that I had in the bottom of my scrap basket. I'm going to use this as my leaves. Now, one thing I will say is that this felt did add some weight to the top of the strawberry, so they might kind of flop over. But if you're using them in a bowl or whatnot, it really depends on how you plan on using them, will determine if they flop over or not. You can see I cut out just a basic leaf shape. And at first I was just kind of fiddling around, didn't quite like it, so I decided to round off the top of my leaf shape. I did a total of 5. Next, I'm taking this Artex green marker that's the same shade as my felt, and I'm going to paint a little stick here. I thought it would actually be really cute to use this as the strawberry stem. So I'm gonna go ahead, let that dry, and then I'm going to go ahead and use my scissors just to cut this down. And once you've got all those pieces together, you can start to put the rest of your strawberry together. So I'm adding a bit of hot glue to the bottom of the stem, and I'm going to put that into the center of the top of the strawberry and really pushing that down so it goes into the fiber fill, and it'll also help to hold all your stitching together even further than what we did already. And now for the leaves, I'm just adding a little bit of hot glue, and I'm putting it right up against the edge of our stem. And then I'm going to overlap our leaves just enough. You can go ahead and just measure to see you've got enough leaves here. I like to look at the 5. And then again, I'm just going to go ahead and add more hot glue. And like I said, I am overlapping my leaves a little bit, but it turned out really cute. I think this is a really pretty touch. I thought it would be fun to, like, say, create a garland using these, or you could make a little girl's room with these for like a mobile, or use them as bulb filler. I just think it's so pretty for summer. I picked up these double-sided adhesive sheets from Amazon, and I thought they would work really well for this next project. I actually think they might be printable as well. So these double-sided adhesive sheets, I got these quite a while ago. I looked on Amazon, they are no longer available there, but pretty much what I did was when I was searching for my double-sided adhesive sheets, I looked at the ratings and the reviews, so I highly encourage you to do the same. I don't know what the other adhesive sheets are like, so I can't say. Plus, I found that what's available here in Canada isn't necessarily going to be available elsewhere. So definitely just search them out and see what is recommended. So this particular sheet is actually not a full-size sheet because I was doing a little test off camera to see how well it will work for this project. But what I did was just grabbed a selection of some scraps out of my scrap bin, and I'm going to be adding them to this double-sided adhesive sheet. So I am going to cut some of my pieces of scraps down into smaller sizes. This part is totally optional. I just wanted to pick a selection of different fabrics and stick them onto this adhesive sheet. One thing I did find that made it a little bit easier is if you cut them down so that the edges were nice and even. Next, what I will be doing is adding them to my sheet, but first I wanted to figure out my layout. I like to do that before I commit to sticking anything down. Some of these I did still leave a bit of a raw edge, but you can leave those pieces overhanging the edge if you wanted, or you can continue to trim them down as you like. So I'm pretty happy with that layout, but I thought, it'll probably be a lot easier if I pressed some of these. So I took my mini heat press, my Cricut mini heat press. This is such a handy tool. And I'm just going to go ahead and iron them all out, the ones that were really wrinkled. All right, so now I want to start to adhere these fabrics to the adhesive sheet. There is 2 backings to this. So I'm just going to go ahead and just pull up one backing, just one side of the backing. And I'm only going to be folding it back part way. I'm going to be attaching my fabrics in sections. I found that if you pull it right back, you could accidentally stick to the rest of that adhesive sheet, and then it's going to end up losing its tackiness if you play around with it and touch it too much. So just like I said, working in sections. So I'm going to put a piece of my fabric down. I'm using my bone folder to press down that fabric onto that adhesive. And then I'm going to pull back the backing a little bit more. And you can see I use my tool just to press that backing down just so it doesn't get in my way. I'm going to go ahead and add some more fabrics here, using my bone folder again to press them into place just to make sure it's really stuck down. If you find that you have too many loose threads, I do recommend that you cut those away as well. A few little loose threads is okay, but if there's an abundance, then I definitely recommend that you cut those away too. So I'm just going to continue to work here on filling up my sheet until I have got it all covered. So I want to make sure that these fabrics really stick to that adhesive sheet. So I put the backing back over it, use my bone folder, press it out, flipped it over, press it out again. And then I'm going to take my scissors and start to cut all the individual pieces out. You can then again go ahead and burnish it down even further if you feel like it needs it. But overall, I was actually really impressed with how well the fabric was sticking to this adhesive. So I've got a few edges that are overhanging. I'm just going to go ahead and trim those off. That's optional. I just thought it would make for a nice clean look. And again, you can burnish this again as needed. I'm sure if you've been a regular viewer of not mine, you have seen this journal pop into view several times. I made this again using fabric scraps quite a while ago. So if you haven't seen that video though, I will have the link down below along with a lot of other videos that you can check out where I am actually using fabric scraps, both big and small. There's lots of ideas. So with these scraps, you can use them like the full size that you've got here. You could use a die cutting machine to cut out different shapes, either a Sizzix machine or a Cricut machine. You can also cut them down to create like little strips of tape like I'm doing here. So I just cut a little piece off, removing the backing. I ended up using my Cricut weeding tool just to remove the backing, and then you can put this in place. I also decided I wanted to see how these fabrics would lay, and so I just added another piece, and they stick together really well, and I think this is such a pretty and fun way to add a touch of fabric to a journal, a card, or anything that you'd like. So this is something that I had created several years ago, and I absolutely love it. And that is a hand-painted fabric bracelet or cuff. And seriously, I wore this a lot and I got so many compliments on it. It just felt good that I was able to create something like this that was really fun and artsy. But now looking at it, it's looking really tired, old, and grungy. So I thought I would share how I made one. So if you're interested in doing that for yourself, then you'll know how. So for my bracelet, I am using some scraps of painter's drop cloth. I like this because it's kind of a rustic look, but you could use like just any strong cotton fabric like that other example there. You can see the difference between, but they're both nice and thick fabrics. So I'm going to prep the fabric by just ironing it out again, just using my mini press here again. I had to spritz some water on it just because of the fabric being so thick, but that worked really well. Now I've got a nice hard surface, a metal ruler, and this is like just an inexpensive rotary cutter that I picked up from Dollar Tree. I'm just going to be trimming off the edge of the fabric just to make it nice and even along all the sides. And I'm also cutting off this finished edge of the painter's drop cloth. You'll have to forgive me here. The one little piece kept on flopping off of this rotary tool. I think I might need to like glue that into place. But anyways, this is a nice long strip. So what I ended up doing was folding it in half, and I'm just measuring it here. It's just under 8 inches. I've created a crease line, and I'm going to cut that down now into half. And hopefully, if I did it right, this should fit around my bracelet. Now, I'm going to compare this to my original bracelet. I wanted it to be the same width. So I've got the two pieces laying on top of each other, place my steel ruler down, and I'm going to use my rotary cutter to trim off the excess on the edge. So you can see I've got a place for my buttons on the original cuff. I am going to just remove just about a centimeter off of one end of the layers of fabric, just one of the layers. You can see here I've got the long strip on the bottom and the shorter one on the top, and you can see how that is there. I'm just going to straighten out that edge. That's going to be where my buttons will be going, but that part is optional. I just wanted to do it that way so there wasn't too much bulk where the buttons were going to be. All right, so I've decided I'm just going to quickly sketch out the design I want to go with. I am going to be basing it off of the original design that I have with just a few changes. And since my bracelet is going to be a little bit longer than the original, I needed to add one more house than what you see here. I also should have tested out to see what the placement would look like when it's on my wrist. I wish I would have done that because then I would have rearranged things a little bit more. But hey, you live and learn, and I'm going to just tell you the mistake that I made so you don't do the same. So I sketched out the houses. I decided to try a few little shrubs, and I was really happy with that. And I'm just going to add a few little details here and there. And next, now we are going to paint them. I am using these Artex acrylic markers that I got. These have been great. I really, really like them. And these are the colors that I selected. I did swatch tests on another piece of scrap fabric. I also did a swatch test of the shrub to see what that would look like. And I really was happy with that, how that looked. Now I'm just going to go ahead and sketch onto the fabric. This is the shorter piece of fabric. I'm sketching out my house design onto that using a thin Sharpie marker. I found that the Sharpie marker worked great, but of course use your favorite permanent marker that you like to use. Now, I went with my original design with the houses, as that was where I am painting houses onto this. You could do flowers, you could do, say, butterflies, whatever you'd like. But I just thought it was just a fun way to create your own personal bracelet or cuff. So once you have your design in place, you can then go based off of your swatch that you created, go ahead and start to fill in all those little blank spots and use any color palette that you'd like. I was kind of going with what I had originally. I just added a few extra colors, and also the colors that I went with were a bit more muted. One thing I will tell you is that the paints will dry darker than what you are seeing at first, so keep that in mind. That's why I recommend doing a swatch test on a scrap piece of fabric. I did end up going over this again twice. Then I knew I had really nice good coverage, but again, that is optional. If you don't have paint markers, then you could just use some craft paint or any kind of acrylic paint. I just do recommend that you give it a nice coat of finish if you're using some craft paint. I'm also going to add some embellishments here. My original had some cute little pink dots, so I'm going to go ahead and add that. And then I'm going to be painting in the bushes by just doing some little C's, like little swirly C's, and adding any other added embellishments that you would like. So this is how it's looking so far. The two are actually very complementary. I'm going to go ahead and use my Sharpie again, and I'm going to go and add some little bit of detail on the windows. I'm also going to enhance the pink dots that I had created by just adding some black circles around them and adding any other details that you think that your bracelet needs. This next step is optional. I grabbed my watercolor pencils. I'm just grabbing a selection. I'm going to use them to add some shading. You could try to use an alcohol marker. I'm not sure how well that would work, especially since I used Sharpie. The alcohol marker could react with the Sharpie. But all I'm doing is adding a little bit here and there, like I said, to create some shadowing. And another option could be using some ink. Say like an ink pad. You could just use a little makeup sponge or a Q-tip and add a little bit of that if you'd like. But I'm just adding a little bit of color here and there. I just like the look. It's what I did on the original. I also took some watercolor and added just some swirls just here and there in the sky. And then using some water and a paintbrush, I'm just going to kind of move that color around just in the sky. And I, again, did that on my original, and you can kind of slightly see that blue tinge just to create that kind of sky look. I'm also adding some green to the edges. This again is optional. It's something that I did on the original bracelet and I really liked it, so I went ahead and added it again on this one. So I'm really happy with how this is looking. It is very similar to the original, but with my original, I just had struggles getting it on. So this, I wanted to make a new one. This here is the base of the cuff, and it was a little bit too long. The top layer, it was great. It was long enough, and I was really happy with that. I measured this all off camera to make sure it was going to fit my wrist. But the bottom piece, since it was just a little bit too long, I'm just going to go ahead and just measure again. Can't do enough measuring, right? And so I decided, I'm like, okay, I can afford to trim just a little bit off of the one end. And next, just to make sure I had the right length, I'm going to go ahead and just use some mini binder clips. You could use, say, some paper clips if you like. I'm just going to add these into place, and then I'm going to test it one last time. And that worked really well. So now I'm going to be using some embroidery floss in a pretty green color to add some stitching and also to stitch on my buttons. I thought with the stitching, I would just keep it really simple, and all I'm going to do is use 2 strands of embroidery floss, and I'm going to do some X's and just some single stitches. I'm doing some stitches just to add a little detail on the houses, as well as in the sky and on the shrubs. I did add a knot to the end of the embroidery floss first, just to make sure I don't accidentally pull that thread all the way through. So you can see here all the fun little stitches that I added. There's no right or wrong way to doing that. And now I'm going to go ahead and use the same embroidery floss and stitch my buttons on. So these buttons are going to go on that little extra flap there. Like I said, I created that little flap so I didn't add too much bulk, because I don't know, it's just a thing for me. I don't like to feel too much bulk on the bottom of my wrist. So I thought that this was a good way just to remove a little bit of that bulk. And so if I have my wrist down on the counter, it's not going to feel too awkward to me, I guess. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch all 3 of those buttons on. So now I'm going to be starting to put the rest of the bracelet together. I needed to add some strings to create the closure for our bracelet. I am going to be using some Gorilla fabric glue to glue this together. It's a really nice, strong fabric glue, but of course, use your favorite fabric glue. So I wanted to start by attaching the pieces in sections. So I've got my two pieces layered on top of each other evenly. I added some adhesive and I'm using a silicone brush to smooth that out. Now this is a very quick drying fabric glue, so you do need to work somewhat quickly, but you do have enough time where you can line everything up and just kind of move things around as needed. So I started up at the top by the buttons, and then I'm going to slowly work my way down, but I am going to leave about an inch on the other end free of adhesive, so I have a place to add my string closures. The benefit of doing it this way too, adding the two layers, is that it will create a nice sturdy cuff. It will also hide all those stitches that we created. If you don't want it to be so thick, then you could use a thinner fabric on the underside if you prefer, but I'm happy with the nice thick layer that this creates. All right, so now for the string closure. I'm using some waxed, I think this is some hemp string. It's a nice and sturdy twine, and I'm going to go ahead and just cut 3 pieces down. I'm just going to fold them kind of in half and create a loop. I'm just going to kind of measure to see how long I need it to be. And this will take just a little bit of fiddling on your part because it's all going to depend on the type of thread that you're using, the buttons that you're using as well. I decided to add a binder clip just to pin that one in place and just kind of test it out roughly to see if that loop is big enough or if I need to make it smaller at all. And I did end up having to make mine a little bit smaller. So like I said, this will take a little bit of fiddling on your part. Another option would be to add some snaps if you'd prefer. Or if you have another suggestion on how to create a closure, then please leave a comment down in the comment section. That would really help me out. All right, I got my strings all cut down to size. I'm adding a generous amount of my adhesive here because I needed those strings to stay in place. You have to be careful. This glue, it wanted to keep on oozing out, so just be aware of that. I'm going to go ahead and spread that glue out, and then I'm going to add my strings evenly. It was kind of messy. I did get some of the glue on my fingers, so just be aware of that. And you do need to use some more adhesive than you would think, so just keep that in mind. I didn't use so much that it oozed out the back or through the fabrics, but I added enough so that that string will hold into place. So I had my strings in place, but the glue was drying a little quicker than I had planned. So what I'm doing here is just kind of pressing them into the glue that's already there. That held them in place while I added some more because I discovered that it kind of absorbed a bit too much, and I didn't have enough on the top of the strings as well as my top layer of fabric. There just wasn't enough glue left to hold it all together. So just adding some more on the top there, spreading that out, and then there should be enough glue there to help hold the strings in place as well as get that top flap down. So you're going to want to keep pressing it down, press until you know that it's held together well. And then if you find that any of your edges are still not adhered properly, I did take a toothpick and put it into the end of my adhesive, and then I just kind of ran the toothpick in between those layers and pressed the edges together. That's one way of doing it. Another option would be to use some white fabric glue. This is just some stuff I got from the dollar store. I'm just going to squirt a bit onto my craft table here, using some water, just spritzing that, mixing that in with my paintbrush. And then I'm going to run this along the edge of my cuff. That will help to, well, first of all, I'm also adding it to the string on the back here to help hold those knots into place, but I'm also adding it to the edge of my cuff. That's going to stop it from fraying. And also you could add it into any of those like little spots where maybe the adhesive didn't get very well, like I showed you before. That'll help hold it all together as well. So all I did was set it aside, allowed it to dry well, and now let's see how it fits. This will take a little fiddling around, but you can do this on your own. Whoops, I just accidentally let it go there. But sometimes what I found was doing the middle button first was helpful, but there should be enough slack there for you to get those buttons or the string around the buttons. But I have to say, I absolutely love this and I can't wait to wear it during market season. It's going to be so fun to wear this. And like I said, I think I would have changed the pattern of this a little bit differently, but overall, I am really, really happy with how it turned out. All right, so I'm going to dig out that fabric white glue again from the dollar store, and I grabbed all these little scraps out of my scrap bin. They were the tiniest little scraps that I had, gathered them all up, and I'm just going to apply some glue to this piece of cardstock. You can use any color of cardstock that you would like. And then I'm just working in sections, and I'm going to spread out the glue and add all these tiny little scraps onto this sheet. This is an excellent way to use up all those tiny little scraps that we keep, and then you can use it for all kinds of different crafting. Now, you could definitely do this project using one of those double-sided adhesive sheets by all means, but I wanted to offer a few different ideas on how you can use a lot of these tiny scraps. So this one, it works really well. I really like it. I've used it a couple of times where you're just using wet glue on the cardstock, spreading it around and applying these little pieces on whichever way you'd like. It doesn't really matter. This is just something fun. And then you kind of got like what's called a master board, as the mixed media world will say, to do lots of different fun things with. All right, so this is fully covered. I'm gonna lay it down, put a craft mat on, and then I'm gonna put a heavy book on top, allow it to dry for several hours, remove it, and then let it finish air drying. But you can see, I don't have that many scraps left. All right, it's the next day, and this is all nice and dry. Now I'm going to be using my Sizzix die cutting machine to cut a heart shape out. And the easiest way is to use a precision plate. Now, of course, you can hand cut this, but since I have this die cut, I wanted to use that. And I do find that cutting through a thick layer like this, it works best if you use a precision plate. So I selected the die that would fit a front of a card really well. All I'm doing is taking my die shape here and I'm placing it all over my master board, and I'm going to figure out what section I want to use. Once you have that section figured out, you can just take a pair of scissors and you can cut that section out. Now, if you have a Cricut machine or a Silhouette, you can see if it will cut through this. I do not have a Cricut Maker or a Cricut Explorer or a Silhouette. I just have the Cricut Joy machines, and I know those are not strong enough to cut through this particular fabric, but I do have my Sizzix machine, and I knew that this would work, especially if you have the precision plate. The precision plate will create a nice hard surface for the die to press against so it can cut through. It works really well. I'm using some washi tape just to tape the edge into place just so it doesn't move around, because I am going to be running this through my Sizzix machine 3 times. Okay, so as I said before, I am going to be making a card. My card is a 5.5 by 5.5 size. You can see it looks really pretty, but I thought it would be fun to add a pop of color. And so I grabbed a piece of cardstock and I'm just going to trim it down to a 5 by 5 so that it would create a nice fun backdrop for my heart. And you can see there's still a bit of a border around it from the card underneath. All I'm going to do is use some double-sided tape on the back of the pink cardstock. I'm going to run strips all around the edge as well as the middle, and then I'm going to put it into place. So then once you have that square into place, I like to burnish it down really well. Now I'm going to add my heart. I'm going to be using this other craft glue. It's another quick drying craft glue. It does have a little bit of odor and you have to be careful because it is quite sticky. I made the mistake here, accidentally touched it and flipped it over and I got some glue onto my card. But using a rag, I did find that it wiped up really well as long as you cleaned it up right away. This isn't a water-based glue, so it didn't end up soaking into the cardstock. I was also able to wipe it off of my craft table here, and it dried quickly, so I was actually able to kind of I don't know, kind of ball it up a bit, and it was, like I said, removed really quickly. I am using a silicone brush here to spread it out. I allowed it to sit there too long, so it was starting to dry. So I used I used a craft stick to remove the majority of that adhesive, and I decided to go ahead and add some more as needed. And again, using my silicone brush, I'm just going to spread that out. So again, being careful, I'm getting clumsy here. I'm just gonna center this onto my card and then it's all ready to go. You can give it as a gift. You could add some cute little words or flowers, whatever other embellishments, but I think this looks so pretty. I actually think it would be great to do a bunch of different cards with different shapes on it. It would be just great to have some cards on hand that you can use as gifts anytime. Here is a playlist full of more fabric scrap craft ideas for you to check out. I hope you found this very helpful and inspirational. I want to thank you all so much for joining me today. We'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.